There's a moment that happens after a breakup that almost nobody talks about. It's not the dramatic part, not the crying on the bathroom floor, not the final argument. It's 3 weeks later. You're doing something completely normal, folding laundry, driving home, waiting in line for coffee. And suddenly, their name flashes through your mind, like your nervous system still thinks they belong to you. And for a second, you forget. You forget you're not together anymore. You forget they stopped calling. You forget they chose to leave. Then reality hits again, quietly, slowly, like cold water, and your brain starts doing what it always does. Why am I still thinking about them? Why can't I just move on? Did they mean more to me than I meant to them? Why does it feel like a part of me is still stuck back there? Why do I still want someone who hurt me? Here's the part nobody explains. You are not weak because you can't move on. You are not broken because you still feel attached. And this is not proof that they were the one. Sometimes the reason someone still has a hold on you has nothing to do with love itself. It has to do with what your nervous system connected to them beneath the surface. Because people don't just become emotionally attached to a person. They become attached to what that person represented. Safety, validation, hope, familiarity, identity, escape. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your mind keeps going back to them, why your body still reacts like the relationship is unfinished, and what actually allows someone to finally let go without forcing themselves to just get over it. Let's get into it. Most people believe moving on is about time, but the real truth is this: moving on is about emotional resolution. Because your nervous system does not measure relationships by calendars. It measures them by emotional imprint. That's why two people can date for 6 months, and one person moves on in weeks, while the other feels emotionally haunted for years. It's not about duration, it's about depth of attachment. Most couples, and honestly most people in relationships, think heartbreak is simply sadness over losing someone. But beneath the surface, heartbreak is often your attachment system going into panic because the emotional home it built around another person suddenly disappeared. And here's what changes everything. Your brain is not only grieving the person, it's grieving the version of you that existed with them. The routines, the imagined future, the identity you built around us. That's why moving on can feel so physically exhausting. Your nervous system is trying to rebuild orientation after emotional disconnection. And when people don't understand this, they shame themselves for still caring. But caring is not the problem. Unprocessed attachment is.
Not because you're dramatic, not because you're obsessed, not because you're incapable of love, but because human beings are wired for connection before logic ever enters the picture.
And this is where most couples never figure it out. The relationship may have ended in reality long before your nervous system accepted it emotionally. That's the gap you're feeling. And once you understand that, everything starts making a lot more sense.
Point 1, you're not missing them. You're missing who you were with them. Most people think they miss the person, but often they miss the emotional version of themselves that existed inside that relationship. Most couples don't realize this because breakups feel external. You think the pain is entirely about losing someone else, when a huge part of the grief is actually losing access to a version of yourself that felt more alive, chosen, hopeful, emotionally available, or safe. And beneath the surface, your nervous system keeps trying to return to that identity. Maybe with them, you felt desired for the first time in years. Maybe you felt emotionally seen. Maybe you felt less lonely. Maybe you finally believed your future could look different. So now your brain quietly says, if I let go of them, do I lose that version of me too? That's the real fear.
Here's a real-life example. Disconnecting version. You sit alone at night, replaying old memories and telling yourself, nobody will ever make me feel like that again. Connecting version. You start realizing, what I felt with them wasn't magic. It was proof that I'm capable of deep connection, and that part of me still exists. That changes everything. Because when you stop treating your identity as something another person owns, you slowly stop needing them to feel whole again. And when you do that, the emotional grip starts loosening without you even noticing it at first.
Point 2. Your brain is addicted to the unfinished story.
Here's the part no one talks about. Closure is not always about answers. Sometimes it's about certainty. Most people in relationships struggle to move on because ambiguity keeps the attachment system activated. Your brain would rather hold on to painful hope than face permanent emotional finality, because uncertainty feels alive. That's why situationships, almost relationships, and inconsistent partners often leave the deepest scars. Not because the connection was healthiest, but because your nervous system never got resolution. It kept waiting for the text, waiting for the apology, waiting for them to become who they almost were. Your brain keeps looping because unfinished emotional stories create psychological tension, like a song that never resolves its final note. And bro, this is where it gets really interesting. Sometimes you're not attached to who they actually were. You're attached to who they could have been, to the imagined future, to the potential. And your inner voice keeps whispering, maybe if timing was different, maybe if I had done one thing differently, maybe they'll realize what we had. But here's what nobody explains. Hope can become a form of emotional self-protection. Because as long as you keep the story emotionally open, you never fully have to grieve its ending. Disconnecting version. Checking their social media every night, searching for signs they still care. Connecting version. Accepting that clarity is sometimes an act of self-respect, even when it hurts. That's when your nervous system slowly stops living in emotional limbo and starts returning to the present again. Point 3. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. This one hits hard. Most couples confuse emotional familiarity with emotional safety, but they are not the same thing. Because your nervous system is designed to prefer what feels familiar, even when that familiarity hurts you. If you grew up around inconsistency, emotional distance, unpredictability, or conditional love, then chaotic attachment can feel strangely normal inside adult relationships. Not healthy, not peaceful, just familiar. So when someone withdraws from you emotionally, your nervous system doesn't always say, this relationship is unhealthy. Sometimes it says, this feels like home. And man, that's why people can stay emotionally attached to someone who constantly made them anxious. Not because the pain feels good, but because the pattern feels known. Here's an example. Disconnecting version. They ignore your texts for 2 days, and instead of stepping back, you become more emotionally consumed by them. Connecting version. You notice your nervous system activation and ask yourself, am I chasing connection or am I chasing familiarity? That question changes lives, because this isn't about becoming cold. It's not about pretending not to care. It's not about avoiding vulnerability. It's about learning the difference between real connection and emotional survival patterns. And when you finally see that clearly, the relationship stops feeling like destiny and starts looking like a cycle you're capable of breaking. Point 4. You attached your worth to their choice. This is where heartbreak becomes identity-level pain. Most people think rejection hurts because they lost someone. But beneath the surface, rejection often hurts because it activates old wounds around worthiness. Especially if you were emotionally invested, especially if you tried hard, stayed patient, gave more chances, over-explained yourself, kept hoping they'd finally choose you fully. And when they didn't, your nervous system translated that into something deeply personal. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe if I were different, they would have stayed. Maybe love always leaves eventually. That's the unspoken pain. And here's what changes everything. Someone leaving does not automatically mean you were unlovable. Sometimes it means they lacked emotional capacity. Sometimes it means incompatibility. Sometimes it means unresolved patterns on both sides. But most couples personalize abandonment because human beings naturally turn emotional loss inward first. Disconnecting version. I need them to come back so I can finally feel okay again. Connecting version. The inability to love me consistently is not evidence that I lacked value. That sentence is powerful. Because the moment you stop using another person's choice as the measurement of your worth, the attachment starts losing its emotional fuel. And that's when the walls inside you begin softening instead of hardening. Point 5. Your nervous system still thinks love equals longing. And this is the one most people never figure out. Sometimes, the reason you can't move on is because your nervous system learned to associate love with emotional yearning instead of emotional peace. So calm love feels boring. Healthy love feels unfamiliar. Available people feel too easy. But emotional chasing, emotional uncertainty, the ache of waiting, that feels intense. And intensity can masquerade as connection. Most couples never realize how deeply their early emotional conditioning shapes adult attraction patterns. Your body starts interpreting emotional roller coasters as chemistry because unpredictability creates heightened nervous system activation. It feels powerful. But here's the truth. Real connection is not built on confusion, not emotional starvation, not constantly wondering where you stand, but consistency, presence, safety, repair. And honestly, once you experience emotionally secure love, you start realizing how exhausting survival mode attachment really was. Here's the contrast. Disconnecting version, I just want them to want me again. Connecting version, I want relationships where I don't have to abandon myself to feel chosen. That's maturity. Not louder conversations. Not pretending you've healed overnight. Not forcing yourself to move on before your heart is ready. But becoming someone who no longer mistakes emotional instability for love. And when that shift happens, you stop chasing people who trigger your wounds and start turning toward people who can actually meet you there. This isn't a checklist. It's an invitation to understand yourself differently. Because once you see that your attachment wasn't weakness, it was your nervous system trying to protect connection the only way it knew how, you stop shaming yourself for being human. And that changes everything. You become more aware, more emotionally honest, more intentional about the patterns you allow into your life. You stop begging for crumbs and calling it love. You stop confusing longing with intimacy. You stop waiting for someone else to decide your worth for you. And slowly, something powerful starts happening beneath the surface. You stop trying to get them back and start getting yourself back. Because healing isn't about becoming someone who never loved deeply. It's about becoming someone who can love deeply without losing themselves in the process. And the moment you finally understand that, the person who once had a hold on you starts losing it.